the ones at the beach.
Yeah, so a whole set at the beach of a rock.
And then I'm seeing a set of 11 of them with the forest image.
Yeah, the 11 were just for fun, so they're not part of the
Okay.
So it's just the series of how many is it? I think it's about well, you asked for 9, so it's a series of 9 at the beach.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
And then I've got one more from the level, I think it's 25, to show how I blended them all together.
Okay. Well,
but I've got them here as well if you want me to do the screen share.
Okay. All right, so these ones were just for fun. Are we looking at these ones, or are we looking at the ones above that?
Yeah, no, you're looking at those.
Okay, that's what I thought. So you were traveling.
Mm-hmm.
How was it?
It was.
Were you traveling
awesome.
just for family pleasure and
family
picture taking?
Okay. Which it's a place we've been to many times before, which is out on the western coast of Canada.
Okay.
It's on the open Pacific, so it's a very different kind of place, and it's just surrounded by this wilderness, so it's absolutely beautiful, and we do love going there.
Okay, so tell me a little about this one.
So the challenge you set me was to take 9 images of a particular scene or setting or person, all of which had to be very different. 9 interpretations of what on the face of it is the same kind of image, the same subject. And this was kind of as my opening shot. It sets the scene. It's a spine of rock which goes out into the open ocean. It's got a very shallow beach alongside it called Cox Bay, which has great tides sweep in and out and totally change what you're seeing a lot. And because of the shape of the rock, starting from the left and going right, our family's always called this for the last 10 years Dragon Rock.
Okay.
We think it looks on the left like the head of a dragon lying down at the sea, and then the long neck, and then the body being the tree line sweeping up.
I love it.
And so I like it's a great feature, whatever it's called. And this image was taken just after sunrise locally. There's some quite high mountains behind, so the sun doesn't clear them until a bit later. And it's an okay shot. The mirroring is nice. It could be more perfect, fewer ripples if I was going after a real fine art image, and it could go closer to the shore. But it's kind of a scene setting shot to show the entirety of what we were trying to then go and work on. I quite like it.
I like the colors of it. I think it's very tranquil. I'm a big fan of reflections as a general rule in all kinds of photography, so I can definitely appreciate that element. I do think that all of the current that we're getting here that creates this separation is a little bit of a visual setback in this one. And that's mostly because the image is very simplistic. Like, we don't have a cloud in the sky, so we have a lot of essentially dead space going around, which lends to that more serene imagery kind of feel. And then we have all this chaos kind of separating these two. So I think if we could get all the way to the bank and it was just that like mirror kind of effect, that it would be a little bit stronger. Or if we waited or even looked at compositing in some kind of visual element into the sky just to give it a little more texture and interest. Mm-hmm. I'm particularly inclined to look for something, I think, over here. Although if you put Dragon Rock or Dragon Mountain, like I think that would, if that was the title, then people would look for the shape and it would make more sense. But I think it's so heavy on this side with the color. Yeah. And then there's so little over here that it's a lot of dead space for me. I also think that it might be interesting to try a different crop version with it instead of doing it as sort of the like widescreen kind of thing. If we just cut it like right here, then the heights would be about the same. And I'd be interested to see what this looked like without all of this element, because I think that this is more visually interesting in the way that it cuts up and out, where this just kind of whomps. in like one fluid movement. But I love the texture of it. I'd like to see play with it a little bit more in post too, and give it a little bit more interest, because I do kind of feel like it doesn't look terribly different than I would expect somebody who isn't a professional photographer to get if they just happen to be standing where you were standing and get the shot. You know what I mean?
For all fair points. I would point out that you told me all of this had to be straight out of camera. So I was already cheating by cropping it.
Okay. Well, that's true too. But, and I do think, I mean, I do think that you did really well out of camera as far as the exposure, because I can see all of the texture in the rocks and the ground and the green. Like there's very little that got lost in the shadow, but we didn't blow out the highlights anywhere else either. So I'm okay with that. I'm curious to see what the original crop was.
Okay. Mostly sky.
Yeah, that's what I figure. So yeah, I think this would probably definitely be stronger cropped in, but I still think if we cropped it, that this might be the story right here.
Okay.
But now that you have it and you've brought them, I would be really interested to see you go back and retouch these just to see how much the personality changes once you get to play with them in post as opposed to out of camera.
Okay.
Okay, tell me about this one.
So this is kind of the other side of the day and an extreme close-up, which was actually using a telephoto lens to compress, because there's in reality is about 50 meters between the rock and the figure on the beach.
Okay.
I deliberately took a shot where you got a bit of lens flare coming in to give a bit more atmosphere, not being allowed to do anything in post. It was one of the ways of adding a bit of character here. And being a sunset shot and a lonely figure on a beach with a walking stick as well actually gave to me a bit of poignancy to the image. So this could be the story of someone's last trip to the beach.
Yeah, I love this one. I love the coloring of it. You know, I think it's exceptional for being out of camera. I do like the lens flare. I think that adds to it. I like that we actually lost most of the information here. There isn't a lot of texture or anything being picked up, so it's definitely mostly silhouette, because I think that allows you to keep the focus on the person, and he's definitely the star of the story. As far, even though like so minuscule as a person in this grand landscape, they definitely are the focus. And I think if we had all the texture from the rocks and everything and all that interest, that we'd lose them a little bit in it.
Yeah.
And this one I think works great with the clear sky, because again, I think, you know, it's just enough to tell the story of the surroundings without overpowering the person element. Okay, tell me this one.
So next one was going out at night on the beach or very late dusk. This is, if I remember, a 2-second exposure, fairly wide open, and I was trying to get the lighthouse you can see on bottom left. But the sky was very dramatic at that point, and I thought, well, let's try and keep some of that without completely blowing out or completely underexposing the sea and the rock. And the really cool blue tones at that time of day completely make a huge contrast to the previous image as well, except for that little one spot of light with a reflected streak.
I love this one too. I think you're absolutely right. I love the diversity between the cool and the warm, and between the first image and the close-up, like, because I totally see the dragon head. And I love the small element, even though it's not a human element. There's definitely that sort of human spirit kind of feel to having the lighthouse in the corner. So it's, you know, it's a man-made element in a mostly natural environment, and it's still so small in it that I think that really makes the shot.
That's kind of a theme with many of my pictures. It seems to be there's a very small element which helps bring the whole shot into focus.
Yeah, I agree. Tell me about this one.
So this one was looking to do more of a an advertising shot for the resort I was staying at, showing a shot from the resort down the pathway onto the beach, and with people playing on the beach, the sea, and obviously the Dragon Rock. Now you can't see the whole thing, but given this is a series, you can recognize what it is, but it also gives you a bit more context and place as to actually where this is positioned. One of the beautiful things about this particular place is the way that the light in the afternoon comes across the lawns, and it makes that grass in front look like velvet. It lasts for about 2 hours. I don't know how it happens, but it's just so beautiful.
Yeah, I definitely think that's a strong element. And especially, you did a really good job, because the green, I'm almost inclined to think, would overpower the rest, because we lose so much of the saturation and detail in the background because of the light. But it doesn't. I like the velvety kind of texture, and you did a really good job for not being able to do any kind of post work. You created this sort of natural vignette with the silhouettes of the trees and the darker colors and everything that leads you right down to the beach, and which is still that element that we're looking for. So I think the composition of the shot really pushes this one to make it really exceptional. And I actually really love the little hidden element of the bike in the corner here. I think that's a great little like carrot for it.
If I'd maybe I should have wheeled it forward a bit.
I like it, because it's almost like not there, but it is. I think that this one works really well as a whole. I might be inclined to come down just a little bit with the crop to cut out some of the extra here, because I feel like there's a lot of negative space here that isn't necessarily important to the story. I'm pulling it in so that the edge of it was here, and it would probably crop like right about here if you just pulled it down. I think would help lead you into the people even more. But overall, I think it's a good shot.
Okay.
Okay.
So then I started getting a little bit alternative and thinking, what else can I do here? This is a shot from the other side of the rock, which is a bit of a hike over the cliff. And I've been looking at a lot of images on Instagram of people taking shots of waves with waterproof cameras, and they're beautiful. I obviously don't have a waterproof camera, so I was thinking, well, how do I get at least a sense of the motion of the ocean through this? Doing some shots just with the camera level kind of worked, but it didn't quite have the drama, because the waves here are only about 4 or 5 inches high, that little bit of surf, and they also have to come very close to the camera to be a reasonable size in frame. So, which is why I then twisted it a little and said, okay, let's try and fill the entire frame with the rock and the sea, rather than leaving kind of a triangle of sky with nothing in it. So we have none of that negative space, which for this image just wouldn't work. It would just be a snapshot. And then trying desperately not to get my camera wet as well while we were doing this. It was tough. Timing it.
It's good. I like extreme photography. There's got to be something at stake. I love the idea of this one. I don't think we quite hit the mark with it. The slant's really, really strong, and because you sort of have these triangles that are appearing all over it, because you have like 1, 2, 3 with the water, and then you sort of have this like obtuse triangle here. And then a longer one here, and then same thing. So you have like you have like 3 triangular elements in the image, which I think is really interesting visually, but I think that we could probably take it and just rotate it up, not so that the horizon is flat, but just so that it's not on such a slant. Because it just doesn't quite look right. And it makes me want to turn my head to the side. So I think if we just took like the edge of this and just rotated it up to like maybe like right about here, so that we wouldn't be quite straight, but it would kind of put the convergence point like almost dead center if you could continue off the screen.
Okay.
Like I want the edge of the water to meet up with the top, like right about here, I think. And then what you might have to do is actually add just a little bit more of the sky back in to pull it up. Or you might just need to change the crop a little bit, because if you pulled this up and cut the crop again closer, I'm not sure that all of this is necessary either, that any of this is adding to it. So
yeah, I think this was the best effort I got, and I agree it's not as strong, it's not the strongest image as is. What I had in mind was being, if I'd had the equipment, the waterproof equipment would have been further out in the green waves and having them just breaking in front of camera with the rock a little bit further in the distance, and that would have been a much stronger image.
yeah, you're definitely confined by fear on this one, which I totally understand, because that's a good cost to replace it. But I'd have been interested to see what you could have did with a faster shutter speed, where you were really stopping all of this motion here, which I also think is interesting. Or in contrast, doing a little bit more of a long exposure where we were getting sort of the sprays of water, and how that would have changed the texture of the water compared to the texture of the rock, because we kind of have the same kind of contrast and shades and depths in the water that we have in the rock right now, if you look at it.
Yeah, no, that's fair. Interesting. I did look at the shutter speed before critique, and it was 1/250th, which is reasonably fast, but obviously not fast enough to catch a wave.
Yeah, it's you might have had to be at like almost like 1/400, 1/500th to stop it. Okay, tell me about this one.
So this is a very big surfing beach, and there are surfers there from first light until well into dusk, and this was going on for dusk. And I wanted to get a sense here of the surfer going in for one last ride. You can see the waves coming in. It's known for its very irregular waves, every 7 to 10 seconds coming in with this great Pacific swell. And you've got a lot of the motion in this picture is from right to left. That's where the dragon's looking, that's kind of where the slant of the middle island is going, and that's where the surfer is going as well. And I was pretty pleased with his position. I managed to catch his legs just in mid stride, which gives a bit more dynamism to the picture. Only treatment here was obviously the landscape crop to get rid of a whole bunch of sky.
So I like this one in theory. I'm a big believer that if you want people to stay on the image, you don't let them wander off it visually. And when everything points to one side, that's exactly what you want to do, is just keep going off the image. So I think that this would be stronger. And obviously, like, you're in the moment, but I would probably take him and turn him around and face him the other way, so that he's going back into the image. Just so that when you follow the dragon's head in and all of the motion that's going that way, that it would stop you there and lead you back the other way. It would create sort of this like wash back and forth visually, I think. I also think that the surfer's just a little too big in it. I would like to see them just a little bit smaller. I think if we were just a little bit wider out, so that they were a little more minuscule, or if we had changed perspectives a little bit, he's a little overpowering for me. But I love the texture. I love the water. I like the reflection that we get in the shallow water that's receding out of the surfer. And again, I think that you're doing a phenomenal job for all of these being straight out of camera. This one I love. Tell me about this one.
So this was a camera phone, because it was what I had on me when I went down on this very misty day. It had been a horrible rainy day, and actually this was this was mid-afternoon. So the sun was quite high and giving this massive cloud bank, which was hanging over the beach, just this translucent quality. When I'm looking at it, obviously you have a huge amount of white space above with very little texture to it. So I wanted to focus down on the dragon rock itself, and actually another rock which stands in the middle. And I thought, in contrast to everything else, where it's been a very strong feature of the images, this one you almost can't see the outline of what's meant to be my main subject, and for me that added more variety.
I love that you did this with the camera phone. What phone were you using?
It's a Samsung S6.
Okay, well,
Which,
I would send this to them.
yeah, it actually takes amazing images. This phone.
Well, this is a very good argument for it's the photographer, not the camera. This is incredible for a cell phone shot, and again for being, you know, straight out of camera and without any retouching to it. Like I see people that create different kind of filters and overlays to get this effect when they don't have it
Mm.
naturally in the day, and I think it's a beautiful job. I love that it fades into the background. Um, I think we have just a little too much space on
Okay.
the left-hand side. I'd like to see it come in just a little bit right here, especially because we have so much white space here. I actually think that it would probably be stronger if we brought it in and down just a little bit, like right about here. We could probably trim off about like a quarter to a half an inch, because even though this was the subject and we're talking about like the dragon rock, in this image, this is the subject right here. So I think it would be totally fine to trim off some of the fat on the left and the top, to bring it in a little bit closer to this and let that be more of the feature. But this is my favorite one of the series so far, and I love that it's
Okay.
taken with a cell phone. All right, tell me about this one.
So now we're getting abstract. This was a sunrise shot, and the sun was hitting a couple of these rocks with a bit of seaweed on them, just beautifully in this pool. And I wanted to play around with the reflections of the trees in the background, are the ones that make up the dragon's back, but also retain the glowiness of the rock with that sunrise sun hitting it. And I frankly love this image for one that's straight out of camera. It's got the deep blues. You can just about see something through the water, so you know it's water. You've got very clear trees up ahead. I did think about actually flipping this one upside down to be even more of a mental challenge when you're looking at it. Didn't quite work, but maybe with another angle it might have done.
I love that we're playing with the reflections, but don't actually have the thing in. I think a lot of people, when they're doing specifically water reflections, they feel the need to keep in the actual landscape and the reflection, which is fine, but is very overdone. So I love that you got creative with it. And the rock is very interesting itself in terms of texture and visual appeal, and the cool side of one and the warmth of the other. This is another one that I'm interested to see what you can do with in post, because I can also see what's going on underneath the water a little bit here. And I think being able to pull in some of these elements and having these sort of under the surface, and above the surface all in one is really visually interesting as well. I also think that this would be an opportunity the next time you guys go to do sort of the same thing, and maybe look at underwater housing, or at least like a GoPro or a life case for the cell phone kind of thing. Yep. And to get almost at water level here so that you have above and below, and just having it sort of a floating rock would give it almost like a comet feel with like the reflection of itself for the future. But I like this one a lot. All right. And number 9.
Number 9. The girl here is my goddaughter, who came with us on this trip for the first time. And we were heading back from watching the sunset behind. And there was just this moment where I could see the sea was coming in. She had this long trail of seaweed, of bull kelp coming into her, and the curve of the trees pointing down straight at her. I was backpedaling furiously at this point, trying to keep everything squared up as she was walking towards me. And I just love this image as an expression of her in this place, in this time, as a place she's fallen in love with. The detail in the water in front, to me, points directly towards her. The dragon is very clearly highlighted, but is not a full silhouette. You can still see a little bit of texture in the rocks in there. And overall, I love this image. It's one of my favorites I've taken.
I like this one a lot too. I love the light on her face, and the fact that you got that, because I think that we were in quite a bit of danger of her being darker because the sun's setting.
Yeah.
I love the texture of the water. She's a little stiff in her stance, which is probably because she's a little cold, and she's holding on to those flip-flops for dear life. But I like the texture of it. I like the little flyaways in the beach hair and the fact that the sun catches her hair behind it. This is another one that I think would probably benefit from being cropped in a little bit because she's the focus and she's just small enough that you can't really appreciate her and just big enough that she's not like the minuscule human element in the grandiose landscape. So I think we'd have to commit and probably crop in. And this one might even be interesting as more of a vertical crop, but I would definitely play around with it. I don't think we necessarily need any of the information here. And I also think that it would be interesting to take it and crop it and just put her in the bottom corner. And play with that. But you could probably play with a couple of different things. But I think changing up the crop would give a totally different feel to what's already a very good image.
Okay.
So, okay.
Cool.
All right. So how are you feeling after doing the whole series out of camera? Was that daunting for you?
No, in a way. You said it was one of the toughest challenges you've ever set someone. I loved it because when I've done event work, it's exactly the same kind of thing, that you need to go and find something different about the way that the artist is performing, try and capture a moment, a nervousness, a look between them. It's still some guys on a stage, but there's that variety that you can capture as an artist. To me, is exciting. Coming at this, which is a place I know very well, and trying to look at it fresh each time, saying, okay, how different can I make each image by doing very, very little, by effectively just with the equipment, was a great exercise. I love doing it.
Okay. So what's after this for you? Refresh my memory.
So after this, it was you actually asked me to do variations on my favorite image, which is the last one.
Okay.
And actually, I wouldn't mind pulling up one of those to show you.
Yeah, absolutely. You pull it up.
Okay. So let me go back.
I'd be very interested to see some of the images out of camera retouched and just see how much the style and the feeling of them changes.
Okay. Well, why don't we then go through these?
Okay.
Let me try and do screen share. Screen share, right?
On the left-hand side, it's the green one.
Should be it. Okay. That should be it. So have you got the same image up?
Uh-huh.
Okay, so that was the base image. I took that one and you asked me to do 6 variations on it. So first one, I've always wanted to try and do these kinds of double exposures. And this was a perfect opportunity to do it. It's the same girl, but it's a different shot taken on the beach. And with a cutter out of actually a very gray background, which is a challenge in itself.
Okay, I'm only seeing her hair and her ear though.
Oh, okay. I've done a full screen share, so let me see if. How about now?
No.
Oh, interesting. That is interesting.
You might have to take it out of the full screen.
How about now?
No, everything's super big. I mean,
Okay. Huh.
I see what you're working towards though, and that's all in the group, so I can pull that up as well.
Okay. So if you go in the group, I think it was the next one I posted a couple of days after this.
Yeah. Okay. I think I got it. Okay. Okay, so this is what we're looking at, right?
Yeah,
okay.
Exactly.
Okay. I'm sorry. Go ahead. Continue. Tell me about it.
So this is a shot of her on a fairly grey, overcast day by the sea. So first challenge was actually cutting her out of the sea, and then changing her exposure quite significantly to make it much brighter, and then blending through the double exposure of the rock, which is taken from the first image.
I like it. I've seen a bunch of these done, and I like the concept of them. I'd be curious to bring back a little bit more of her sweatshirt through so that it doesn't blend entirely in, kind of like we have on the hair here.
Mm-hmm.
But I kind of think that it works like this, but it would be interesting. And there's actually, maybe I'll do a tutorial on it because I've done a couple of images with overlays like that. And you can play with like liquefy and warp and stuff to actually bend the image around her so that it actually looks like it's part of her instead of just overlaid over top of her.
So
we're like
projected on.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah. Okay. Tell me about this one.
Second one, this one's called What Would Trey Do?
Okay.
my attempt. So the sky's gone a very funny color. The sea around has gone silver. Everything else has been dulled down. Everything's been boosted up to the max. It's an attempt. It's to see how far I can push it.
Were you happy with it?
It was interesting. I like the way that particularly like keeping the white balance on the seal much whiter around her. So there was almost like a patch of silver around her, and everything else fades away into this kind of gloomy, slightly gloomy orangey feel.
I think my only caveat with that is that in order for it to be believable, because that's the trick. Like we know that we don't get like the neon radioactive kind of colors. But if you keep with the laws of physics and what should be seen, it becomes easier to convince people that this is what it was. So the only problem with that is that if we had all of this color in the sky, then we should have it picking up in the reflection as well. So you would have to sort of mimic that, and you would have to, so you can see like down here, like these three waves kind of picked up the yellow from where it was. Like we would need it in the highlights and only in the highlights everywhere. And this is where retouching starts to get really tedious because you would want to pick up those flat reflections, but still keep the dark blues everywhere to pull in everywhere else. And then it would be a lot more believable.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wasn't going for believable, admittedly.
Okay.
Well, so
and it's
interesting. Sorry.
That's okay. It's not believable in the sense of, oh, it was just that way. It's just that it makes sense visually, even though it's somewhat of a fantasy image.
Okay.
Okay. Tell me about this one.
So I've seen a few images recently of a very, very unsaturated, very high key types of pictures, mostly of flowers and mostly in a pink. And I had kind of this image of doing a cotton candy pink version. And I got there and I looked at it and I said, well, okay, it works, but it doesn't suit the image. So I said, well, let's play around with the white balance and see where we go to, and with the toning, and actually coming up with, the more I worked on it, the softer I made it, and I kept on looking at it, I thought this looks more and more like a kind of an ink watercolor, almost Victorian.
Yeah, I could see that.
And I thought, okay, this is as far as I could take it in Lightroom. So this is only Lightroom. If I wanted to take it further and make it more watercolory and start getting some of those water effects within the ink, I'd need to take it into Photoshop and do some work in that. But for doing a just Lightroom work here and thinking, you know, step by step, how do I get there? This is a very great departure from the original image.
Yeah, I agree with that. Okay, tell me about this one.
So this is image analysis. When I looked at the picture, what do I see as the main lines here? And they are, so going from bottom left, they're the waves radiating out, which all point towards her. There's a line of bull kelp pointing straight at her. There's the horizon line, which goes straight through the shoulders. And there's, to my eye, there's a great curve starting at the top of the trees and going all the way to, so touching her body and coming back round onto the beach. Or just to try and break down the image a bit and say, okay, what was I seeing at that moment in time and why did I take that picture?
Okay, I like it. The only one that I think I might be inclined to add in from that is if we're counting these ripples coming out, we have this big swell here by her feet as well. That would almost radiate out like a pebble being dropped in still water. And these lines are pretty strong too, but I totally see what you're doing. That's really interesting. I don't think I've ever seen anybody else do that. I like that. Okay, tell me about this one.
So this is the one I really wanted to show you, which is I took every single one, and this is going back to a little to the sort of data night picture that we saw in a critique back in I think it was April or May. I took every picture of the rock itself, so not the abstracts and not the one from reverse, and thought, how do I blend these together in a way that shows the different moods of the place? That was your challenge. How do I show the different moods of the place? And say, well, okay, I've got pictures that show the different moods of the place. Can I show those all in one image, blended in a way which captures each of these and still looks artistic rather than just a mess? And this was my attempt.
I love the concept for this. I would be really interested for you to take this and play with it a little more, and see if you could blend out some of the edges and the lines.
Those were deliberate in some of them, because there's, yes, some of them are a bit abrupt, but it reminded me a lot of stuff like David Hockney did with photographs, where he took lots of Polaroids of a scene and stuck them together to make up the scene. And the things don't line up, and there are obviously edges everywhere, but overall you're still seeing the bigger image made out of these small squares.
No, I like the idea of them being in, but I think that specifically these two are really distracting and up here. Whereas this one maintains that they're separate images, but it kind of blends in a little bit.
Okay.
So I think if you went in and just kind of softened, not necessarily got rid of, although that would be an interesting exercise too, but I like that they're separate photographs. So I think if we kept most of them and brought them in, but had them just be just a little less visually aggressive, that this would actually be a really cool shot. I'm not particularly fond of all the white space. And I think maybe stretching some of the color up or down, or even cloning and copying it in to kind of fill in the blanks a little bit. Because I keep looking at the rectangle, the square, and the triangle of space because they're so white comparatively, and I really want to focus in on her. But I think what you have going on is a great shot. It's a shame that like all of this comes in here, because if we could take this and just kind of crop this in here, I think that'd be awesome. But I definitely want the lighthouse to stay in too. So yeah, I think if we could find a way to like fill or even add other images from other shots that you didn't necessarily bring to critique, that could fill in sort of the dead space, this would be a very, very interesting photograph, and very unlike anything that I've seen from others. So, which is always good.
Nice.
Okay, so how happy Oh, I had that on you all the time. So people are like watching and not seeing anything we're looking at. My bad.
Yeah.
How happy are you with the images?
Um, they're, I mean, all the images are, they're not all what I'd call portfolio. There's not even close. But all of these were part of an exercise, and why I did this blend as part of the next challenge was to show what that gestalt, that combination could be,
Okay.
which I thought was, taking a step beyond the challenge maybe, but was for me was kind of brought it all together in a way that other people hopefully can see and appreciate.
Yeah. I love, you definitely accomplished like how different you can get in the general feeling and emotion of a photograph of essentially the same subject matter by playing with it. I love this exercise. I'm going to start making other people do this. This is such a great visualization tool for others that I think would really help people start to understand composition a little better and where the visual interest is.
Mm-hmm.
And I just love this concept. I think that's such a great art image as opposed to just a photograph. Well done.
Thank you.
Okay. So you went on vacation, you took a bunch of photos. I gave you some really tough challenges. How are you feeling?
I'm feeling good.
Well, now what do you want to do?
Now what I want to do? Well, I've got this convergence series that you wanted me to do, which I'm still thinking about. The more I think about it, the more something more photojournalistic seems to spring to mind, because that's, you want a common thread running through this. So a common thread, I've got to have a story, but each story builds on, there has to be linkages between the images as well. So there's two complications. How do I capture a story and also get the linkages? Otherwise, I can see this taking a long time to complete.
Yeah.
Maybe not a bad thing, but you probably got a sense that I like running at these things and getting them done and then seeing what it's like.
Well, I think the last image that we looked at was definitely a convergence image of several different images. I really love this as a concept, and I've never seen anybody else do it quite the same. So I would love to see you create a series of images that are perhaps the story of a place or a subject, whatever it is, whether it's like, the Dragon Rock or whatever. If you did it with the forethought of this is what you were doing, was essentially putting them all together. So most people create a body of work and have a portfolio, and you go through the images and you see the story of the portfolio. It would be pretty impressive to have all of the images in the portfolio that tell the story and then have them all as part of one great image. I think that would be awesome.
Cool.
What do you think?
I like that.
Good. Let's shift it and keep that the focus of the convergence image. So it still kind of follows suit, but I think that would be a really neat project, and I totally see the saleability of that too.
Cool. All right.
I dig it. Cool.
Nice.
Okay. Was there anything else that you wanted to chat about today or that you needed help with?
No, I'm pretty happy. It's going to be, it's lovely weather here now, but it's going to be thundery and raining tomorrow. So I'm going to head out into the forest and see what I can do to get some moody images and put those up
I love it.
in the forum.
Okay, well, I have nothing else for you, so go and shoot.
Cool. All right, Jess, thanks very much.
All right, I'll talk to you soon. Bye.
Bye.